Hi, everyone, and welcome to Catalysts for Change, the show where we explore the stories, strategies, and turning points of leaders driving meaningful impact in their communities and across the country. I'm Adam Lister, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's guests are Katie Dieckhaus and Todd Cruse, two leaders bound together by grief and resolve, and the belief that change is not only possible, but necessary. Katie is the mother of Evelyn Dieckhaus, one of the 6 lives taken in the Covenant School shooting in March 2023. Todd is the board chair of Voices for a Safer Tennessee, the nonprofit formed in response to that tragedy to advocate for common sense firearm safety laws in the state of Tennessee. What began in pain has become a movement of over 30,000 Tennesseans, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, all united by a desire for a safer future. This conversation is raw, real, and remarkably hopeful. Let's dive in. Katie, Todd, thank you both for being here today. Katie, I'd love to start by honoring Evelyn and asking you to tell us a story, tell us a little bit about her and what we all need to know about Evelyn.
It's my favorite thing to do, so thank you. And I haven't done one of these in a little while, so I think I'm right off the bat going to get emotional, and that's okay. So my husband and I have 2 beautiful girls, and we're so thankful for them. And Evelyn, in her short 9 years on this earth, was such a kind soul. She also had a deep, she was a deep thinker and feeler, but also loved having a great time, had the best giggle, and also if she would get in trouble, had the best stare down that actually made her mom and dad nervous. What just happened? Wait, we're supposed to be the parents here. Hold on. So, I always love saying we talk about her favorite color being pink. You would ask her, and she was so quick. She'd be like, pink. And then she would wear it with black combat boots. And I'm like, I feel like it's such a great description of but she was just so mature for her age, even more than I even realized until later on. But she loved crafting and art, and she was so detailed in all of her projects that she would do, or just want to learn how to felt or knit. She loved playing music. I was playing the ukulele, the piano. Had such a beautiful voice. Was starting to sing more, and loved basketball, getting into volleyball. Was so excited to practice pitching for softball. A loyal friend. She was such a mediator between her friends. She came home one day and was like, Mom, my friends called me their counselor because I helped them work through a problem. And they got kind of upset with me when I gave them advice, but then they worked it out and came over and thanked me for it. And I was just so, just so proud of her. And I always have to add this in when I talk about her because, she's also a little sister. And she and her big sister had the sweetest relationship, but also sisters, where it's they were the best of friends, but could be the worst of enemies really quickly. But I miss the fighting. And I miss the laughing, and we still do laugh, and we still have joy in our life through our girls and so many people. But yeah, she just she's amazing. And I have the day that her I talk about this often. The day her school stuff got brought back was a day I really felt just again, like my knees were going to buckle out from under me and I couldn't process what was going on. But I started looking through her school journal and her sweet Saved by Grace Bible verse book. And she's given me a lot of things to share with people, which I'm so thankful for. And so this is something she wrote in her journal. And I do share this often, but I just think it's such a great message. On Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, Evelyn wrote, "My hopes and goals for November. My goals for November are to finish my book project early," which I know she did. She got her homework done always well in advance. "And my book early. I hope I can have a humble mind towards my classmates. Another goal is to memorize 1 Peter 3:8. I hope the Lord will be with me this November and I can do 20 good things for others this month. Those are my hopes and goals for November." And she had a list of ways to be kind, along with this quote from Lin-Manuel Miranda. The girls loved Hamilton and became a Lin-Manuel fan very quickly. But she wrote his quote in her journal, "Give your time, give your heart, give your service, give someone something you made." It feels incredible. And her list of ways to be kind are compliments, remember birthdays, lift others up, follow directions the first time, which my husband and I always laugh at because we worked on that so much. And, it was still a work in progress for a long time with that. So I'm glad she wrote that. I think she was listening to us. Set examples, smile, help clean up, golden rule, lift others up, hug your teacher, be kind to others who are mean, forgive, just some really great things that I think everybody can use. She had a very deep faith, deeper than I had again even realized. And January 2023, she told me I was tucking her in, which I still do every night. We tuck our girls in. But she goes, "Mom, my New Year's resolution is to read the Bible all the way through this year." And I was just floored. I was like, "Oh, okay, wow, that is a great goal. Let's see how it goes." And I joke she made it to Genesis 18 and was like, "All right, Mom, I don't know if I can do this." I'm like, that's a big book to take on. But I later realized she was underlining verses as she was reading it. And she underlined Noah was a righteous man. God saw that what he had made and it was good. She would underline the word covenant. She underlined continuously God saw what he made and it was good. She underlined, "I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great. You will be a blessing." And I love this. I believe it's like a girl's Bible. So there's questions on this side and everything. And it says, "I believe God can do the unbelievable," and you can circle what you want. And it's either A, without a doubt, B, possibly, C, maybe he used to, but now I don't know. She put B, possibly. So I thought that was perfect. She's like, she's still really trying to process, which there's a lot to process. So she also tabbed it today and then a year. She was very organized. And then something that she wrote and we turned to right away before we started meeting with lawmakers in her Saved by Grace Bible book. She wrote, she wrote the verse. She wrote, "Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind." 1 Peter 3:8. And that was actually, I kind of put it together later that that's actually what she wanted to memorize in November. And that's been a big guiding light.
It's a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
And in a little bitty package
Yes.
there.
Yes.
How have you carried her spirit into this work, and how does she continue to guide you today?
I mean, it really is my why, I feel her with me all the time. And my other baby too. She's not a baby anymore, but, I think as a parent, we just want to do whatever we can for our kids and love them and help them to grow to be the best humans they can be. And it's hard, but now I have a new outlook on life, and I just have her right by my side. So she really is helping guide so much. And I also will forever say this, through kindness and connecting with people, because we just need more of that for sure.
Yeah. I've had the privilege to know you for a little while, and that shows up. And so she's living every day in the ways that you've just described. Todd, I'd love to ask you, you've known Katie and Evelyn and the entire Dieckhaus family for a while, and you knew her before this tragedy. I'd love for you to share a memory that you have of Evelyn and something you've held close to you about her.
Good question. So we're neighbors. Well, neighbors being a loose term. We're all in the same hood, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. 3 or 4 streets apart. And I didn't know Evelyn that well. I didn't know Mike and Katie that well. What I do know is that when she was taken, it was one less laughing voice at the Easter egg hunts and one less joyful child running down the street for the neighborhood Halloween events. And, I knew Mike and Katie more than I knew the kids, but, whether it happens down the street or across the country, it's one less. And that just doesn't work, right? And so when I think about the impact that Evelyn has had, I say this a lot, especially when we travel around the state. It's like, because Katie usually is there. And I'm like, if Katie can stand up here and tell her story, I sure as hell can take some time off of work or take time out of my day or put something to a side to focus on this, because we can do a lot better than one less.
To that point, Katie, when people go through something unimaginable, there's no script or rule book on how to approach things. But at some point, you chose to act, and you stepped into a public space when you could have stayed private. I'm curious what helped you make that decision.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you saying that, because there truly is. There's no script, and there never will be. And I like to try to communicate that, but that's even hard to do. Individuals are going through so many things in so many different ways. But, this to me, there's not this deep answer. It simply is, I didn't know what else to do. And I had to. I say often, for a solid year and a half, I really felt like survival mode. And this is just what I had to do. And I continue to feel that strongly because of where we're at. I just dropped my babies off at school. That's all I did. And I work hard to keep them safe. And I worry about them. I didn't worry about that day. I just dropped him off at school. And so it's just so sad that this continues to happen. And I just know we can do better.
I can't begin to imagine the way that you think about the survival mode and how you're getting through each day. And I think to the point that we made earlier about there not being a rule book and you were showing up and you were getting through each day. At what point did you feel like that you were still surviving, but that you were also channeling that into something that was really powerful and really intentional? And did you see that as a way to protect Evelyn's legacy and her story?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I literally felt it after our first meeting we had with a lawmaker. Our first meeting, I do joke for a while, things would just come out of my mouth and then I would have to, it's like I would wake up all of a sudden, like, what did I just say? But what I will tell you is that, again, my husband and I don't have, we're both in healthcare. So rather than feeling this intimidating feeling of stepping into a completely new world, it just felt right. And so literally after the first meeting, it also gave me very direct drive and purpose for what we were instantly experiencing. And I always preface this too with this is all multi-layered, and I'm very well aware of that. I've learned a lot. And I realized after that first meeting, and then shortly after my husband and I had a couple of more meetings quietly, how quickly I learned this is going to be a long process, and I'm here for it. And I am trying to look at a lot of different perspectives to try to understand. And that is going to take time. But I don't know what else to do.
Todd, you're a parent. And apart from the relationship that we talked about that you had with Mike and Katie and the Dieckhaus family and the other families that were impacted by this tragedy, what brought you to this advocacy and this work specifically?
Started with my wife, right? So let's be honest, that when you think about how Safer Tennessee started, it started with a bunch of concerned moms who said, hey, so many people have tried this. Whatever way they've tried before is not working. We got to try something different. I wasn't working at the time. I was retired or taking a sabbatical or whatever you call it. I was annoying my wife. So basically, Carly said, hey.
You're a man in search of a purpose.
I was a man in search of a purpose. Yes, Adam. Carly's like, hey, I need you to come to this meeting with me. And so I sat there, and it was me and one other gentleman in the room who is very close to this conversation. And we listened to all of these conversations happening around this table. And I walked out of there, got in the car, headed back to the house. Carly and I were talking, and I'm like, man, I really applaud what everybody's thinking, but there needs to be more people that look like me having this discussion. I'm a gun owner. I'm a Second Amendment guy. I'm a Republican. Why aren't those of us that are responsible gun owners, to a conversation we were having before we started the show, why aren't more of us having this conversation? And so that was the thing that got me started. The second thing, Adam, is I started looking at the data. And to be honest with you, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed for our state. I was embarrassed for my party. I was embarrassed for those of us that didn't pay enough attention to what was happening.
Some of that data, Tennessee, third highest in accidental shootings, number one killer of children in the state, firearms.
Yep, exactly. And so you start looking at all the data, right? You can start ticking it off, where we stand in stolen firearms, where we stand in accidental shootings, where the fact that it is the number one killer of children. And people will try to argue with you, but data doesn't lie, right? I'm a business guy by nature, in healthcare as well. And you can't run a business without actionable data. You can't have this conversation without actionable data. It just doesn't lie. Numbers don't lie. And when you started looking at it and you started thinking about it and you started thinking about We have one less cheerful voice in the neighborhood. We have 6 less cheerful voices in this town. We have accidents that are happening around, turn on the news every night and it's happening somewhere. And then you couple it with, if this was up to the metropolitan governments or up to the inner city communities, they would have solved this issue by now. Now, they may not have solved it in a way that gun-owning, right-leaning, Second Amendment people would appreciate, but they would have solved it. And so, long answer to your question is, all of that was percolating in my mind, and I was thinking, okay, we can thread the needle here and we can figure out a solution that's going to work for the majority and prevent tragedies from happening and make Tennessee safer. And there's always an and there should be an and.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the early nascent days of Voices for a Safer Tennessee. You alluded to the folks that were around the table and involved and kind of the spark here, but the organization evolved out of a series of group meet conversations and living room chats. People were grieving, and there were lots of big personalities driven by huge emotions and complicated feelings around how to think and how to feel and how to act. One of the things that struck me in the earliest days of the organization was the incredibly high concentration of sophisticated, particularly as you talked about, Todd, sophisticated women, accomplished professionals with a seemingly unbounded sense of energy and purpose. While I think that is a gift for a lot of organizations, I have supported and worked for entities that would crave to have a fraction of that. That energy often comes with a variety of opinions, and particularly around mission and strategy. What did those early conversations feel like to both of you as you were kind of working through what this kind of concept could be and what the organization should be and how it would eventually take shape?
You want me to start with that? So I will tell you, our story of me getting involved with Voices for a Safer Tennessee, we had a close friend that helped us, just my husband and I, set up meetings like I had mentioned shortly after everything had happened. And I heard of this organization doing linking arms for change. And it sounded like such an incredible concept and a heartbreakingly beautiful way to bring people together. And so again, just a reminder, it was gathering people throughout the state, whoever wanted to come to Nashville, to stand together and link arms from Vanderbilt Children's Hospital down to the Capitol. Mike and I snuck in that line quietly. We wanted to be there. And I thought this organization had been around, and I was kind of confused as to how I didn't hear about it. And I learned that day that it was brand new. And the same friend I mentioned was just like, hey, Katie, you should probably just maybe look into this some more. And a group of us went up to DC for some meetings with some, with lawmakers on the federal level. But, and we hadn't really, some of us hadn't met and didn't know each other. And it was pretty incredible how there was not this major planning feeling. It just came together. And when we had meetings, this natural flow happened that just, again, it just felt right. And this is what we need to do right now. And something I will say forever about the organization that I am thankful for is there is constant questioning and thoughtfulness on any action that we take, anything that's out there. And it might frustrate some people and not other, I've also learned you can't make everyone happy. But at the same time, it has helped me remain calm and focused in such a focused it's such a big topic we're taking on, and just the fact that it's Tennessee state focused, and we have 3 areas that we are really trying to work on. And I'm going to let Todd kind of say more with that, but I do feel we're continuing to kind of figure it out. We're still a newer organization.
Yeah,
and
I think that's right.
It's constant change right now.
I think it was in the beginning. First of all, I didn't know what GroupMe and Slack was. Let's just start with the basics.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it was very organic, and organic growth is good until it's not. Right. And so in the beginning, you had everybody forgets about, what's the word I'm looking for? They compartmentalize, right? It's like we are all driven by this one thing and we got to go do it. And that's great. We're all volunteers. This is a volunteer organization, and let's just go get it done. And that works in the beginning. At some point in time, you have to industrialize it. Right. If you want it to have staying power. I think that was the biggest thing, that, you had a lot of people with a lot of different political views, a lot of different overall ideological thoughts about it, different experiences, different exposure, which was great, which is what makes the organization very unique. Right. Again, you said it in the beginning, Democrats, Republicans, Independents. It was mostly female in the beginning. It has grown dramatically. But in the beginning, in its nascent stages, it was not structured, and that's fine because it was being driven by passion. At some point in time, passion has to give way to pragmatism and say, okay, how do we get past the first 90 days, and how do we make sure we're sustainable for 6 months? And then it's like, how do we make sure we're sustainable for a year, and how do we make sure we're sustainable and we have a 3-year growth plan? And so I joke about this. I don't joke about it, but I do joke about it internally to my friends. It's like, I think there was a, call it what you want to, divine intervention, invisible hand, guidance from somebody like an Evelyn saying, hey, Todd, you can be dispassionate to a nth degree. You need to help this organization get some structure, period, hard stop, and make it successful. Not going to run it forever, not going to chair it forever, going to let the staff do its job, but you need to spend some time. And so I think it was a confluence in the beginning of a lot of different people's, a lot of different thoughts, a lot of different ideas. Let's put some structure around it. Let's think about sustainability. Sustainability is so important. We've seen so many, I'm sure you have in your line of work, so many great ideas that get started with a bang. Bad choice of words, but get started and then fizzle out because they don't have the concept of sustainability, of, as Katie said earlier, being in it for the long haul. So what does that mean?
Well, I think, both literally and figuratively, when something gets started with, in this case, the tragedy at Covenant School, the risk there is that unless you can figure out how to operationalize the good work, then you get crowded out by a myriad of other interesting things that happen, whether they are environmental disasters or economic disasters or human disasters. I'm going to claim credit-ish for something that a friend of mine has used often, but real change and advocacy strength occurs when you align people, which you had, money, which is necessary, and message. And I think often it's easy to conflate, to your point, pragmatism as a negative value. But if we can reframe that to message, it is better sustainable for the people that are involved in the organization because we know what we're focused on.
Yeah, no, and I was going to say that just the old concept of burnout too. When the drive is passion and people are hurting, it's like go, 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 go. And that talk about sustainability, it's so much to take on. And so many of the individuals the moms that started this also have full-time jobs and are working moms, and then trying to do this also and being involved in other ways in the community and that's something that it's something that is very important to help along with that sustainability. And this is where Todd and I do feel like we're a great match here, because he says this and I totally agree. And I am learning from that, but then I definitely will forever be passionate. And we do need that. So there does have to be this balance of pragmatism and passion.
That's right. It's not an either or.
Yeah.
I think that when we, again, in the beginning, to your point, driving with so much passion would have led to burnout. The organization would have fizzled. Everybody, and you guys, will all remember this, but Covenant tragedy happened, special sessions called. You're all within a very short period of time, and everybody's saying, okay, this is it. We're going to strike while the iron's hot. Florida did it. They were pointing to other states that had wild success in a special session after a tragedy. The writing was on the wall that it wasn't going to happen. Right? I remember
in the way that the summit envisioned.
In Summit had envisioned. I can remember talking to a member of another organization during the last days saying, today's the day. And I'm like, today's the day they're going home. Right? Having been around this for 20 some odd years in the political space, you can see the writing on the wall. And that's kind of the moment where you said, look, if they're not going to get it done right now, in the heat of the moment, as people call it, then this is going to take years to make the right kind of change that's acceptable to Tennesseans. And that understanding, I think, is what finally, I don't want to say reshaped the organization, but it sure had a hand in helping the organization cut through some of the disparate views that were had by multiple position holders in the organization to say, hey, if it didn't happen now, it's not going to happen next year. It's an election year. It's not going to happen the year. You know what I mean? You start thinking about it. It's like, okay, we're playing a 4 or 5 year game. Yep. And we need to be very disciplined about that, both from a fundraising perspective and from a messaging perspective and from a growing the coalition perspective. So anyway, it was an evolution that has to happen in every organization.
Yep.
I think it happened timely enough for us that it has led to a very solid foundation that this organization is built on and will continue to operate on.
Well, one thing that I think is unique about this organization is a lot of nonprofits may start with a desire to see some change or some benefit or whatever. This had the additional layer of people working through grief in real time. And that clouds sometimes the strategy. It makes us think about things differently. It orients our timelines differently. Katie, you've been described as a calming voice and calming presence in a lot of these conversations. I'm curious how you, through that, just in the way that you showed up, helped to guide the tone of those strategic conversations. Because that, in addition to the strategy, I think is something that was a kind of under the surface threat to the organization, is the way in which we approach the work. And so I'm curious was that natural to you? Is it how you show up in your life always? How did you maintain that kind of calming presence for folks?
Well, I do love people. And a lot of so I spent 17 years being an occupational therapist, worked with kids and families. I definitely have a passion for working with people and trying to help how I can and things like that. But also something that comes along with that job is always trying to find a bigger picture, which can then ultimately help the child that I am seeing. So it's so interesting because, again, it's such different lines of work, but I was a psychology major also. So the psychology of it all too does just make sense to me. And I will tell you, I quickly understand too where people would like to tell how they feel in their story. And so let them, and let's try to listen. Because also somebody told me, a friend of ours, and I will never forget this, summer of 2023, she said, Katie, there has to be this little bit of difference. And we live in such a volatile device world right now. And we could go on and on of where that's coming from. I know our phones and social media do not help. We're so quick to judge. We're so quick to cut others down before we even know the full story. And there's no room for movement with that. It's a hard stop. It's a door closed. And we have to shift that mindset, or we really won't move forward. And so I do feel there is such a big, deep understanding within this organization with that too, but also just on a pure personal level, I will forever continue to do that. Safer Tennessee or not. That's just how I will forever be. And I want to do that for my girls too, because I want them, and I know they do, but like, I just want them to see that, like, hey, let's give this person a chance and see where we can talk and where we can find every conversation I've had, every single one. We may disagree on 99% of the things. We'll find a 1% that we can agree on and build upon that. And it's just incredible how much more productive that feels and hopeful.
I'd love to kind of double click on that by going back to the conversation we were just having about the real risk to the organization that the group could have fractured before it even began to get off the ground. And I think often a lot of mission-based organizations struggle to find their way in those early days because it's difficult to align founders around strategy and tactics. I'm curious how you all were able to find clarity on who you were as an organization while giving people an opportunity to have different perspectives and not shutting down divergent voices in those early foundational days.
So it was a combination of two things, maybe three. One, quickly when we formed the organization, we brought in people that weren't necessarily members of the founding group. Because I think that while that's important, if you were to heat map where the founding group was from, you'd be concentrated to 3 zip codes in Davidson County. We needed statewide reach. So we tapped into people to join the organization that had a statewide network that we could start talking to. So part of it was now you had more voices in the conversation, which I think is healthy, right? I mean, the same time that Safer Tennessee is getting started, I'll never forget, I got a phone call from who is now our treasurer of Safer Tennessee and our both the C3 and the C4, a guy by the name of Tim Sinks and another guy here in town by the name of Clay Richards. And we got on this conference call and they said, what are we going to do? This is an outrage. And they're just like, we got to do something. And we had served together on Martha O'Brien. We'd done a lot of nonprofit work together. And so I was like, well, hey, I just left this meeting. It was literally the same day I left the offices out in Maryland Farms that I'm on the phone with Tim and Clay. I'm like, I just left this meeting and this very interesting, thing is happening. It's bubbling, right? And they're like, well, we shouldn't compete. We want to be a part of it. I said, okay, great. So again, hadn't even got ready to form the organization yet, but you're starting to get multiple voices in. And I think that helps, right? Because some were very passionate working moms. Some were very wildly successful businessmen. And everybody was still singular focus on how do we get the right change to happen. And I think that helped provide clarity. The other thing that helped is just, and this is again where play to your strength of being dispassionate. And I know we talk about this and she brings the passion and I try to just be like, pragmatically straightforward. Some of it had to happen through, I hate to say it, but just brute force. We got to do it like this, right, guys? We have to decide what are our three things. We have to decide we're not going to deviate. I think that was probably the biggest aha moment for us, is as an organization when we were getting started, once everybody got around that these are our three core tenets, and we don't care if you feel this way about same union or same sex, or if you feel this way about whatever, you pick the topic. I don't care how you feel about that. How do you feel about these three things? Because if you are for these three things, then we want you under the tent, and we want the tent to get bigger. Leave the rest of your baggage outside of those four walls. Once we got that discipline in place and we got it pretty quick in the beginning, the coalition started growing fast. And even though there were competing voices on the outside of the tent, inside the tent, everybody was saying the same thing. We need to be doing X, Y, and Z. This is what will make Tennessee safer. This is what the data shows: secure storage, background checks, temporary transfer. If we do those three things, our communities are going to be safer, and we're all going to be happy. That, to me, was like the turning point in the organization, to your point of how do you get all these divergent voices singing from the same song sheet, basically. And that's how it happened.
Yeah. And that was something that helped me, because people will, and you've asked this in this discussion, how did this happen quickly? Something I realized, because I always want to give credit to how many organizations, nation and statewide, have been working on this. This has been going on for a very long time. And people are doing amazing work. And I always we need to respect that with each other too, organization but something that helped me quickly connect were the three focus areas, and being state focused, because if I go on and I think more on a nationwide level, and we're dealing with grief of losing Evelyn and the situation, it was too much. So it actually helped me stay more focused, which also helped my grieving process, if that makes sense.
Katie was a calming affect when she joined the organization, though, right? For one, at least for me personally, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think I know what everybody else is thinking is nobody's walked in her shoes. And she comes in, sits down, always with her notebook, always with her pen, and she's ready to get to work. And she's like, we can do this. And so that was a driving force too for a lot of us. And now when we talk about the other organizations in the space, she's right. There's a ton of organizations that have tried it, and there's a lot of respect for that. I look at it and say, those are examples of what we're not going to do, because we haven't seen it move in Tennessee. Now that's may come across as disrespectful to some of the organizations, but for me, they were learning moments. They were like, okay, that didn't work, so I'm not going to suggest that the organization repeat that. We need to try something different. And not to say that what they tried was bad, or again, I don't disrespect their Herculean efforts. But it was like every time we saw another organization, or were compared to another organization, or another organization was talked about in the space, we would trace it back and say, okay, what has happened in the last 3 years that has gotten from A to B? And if it hasn't worked, we're not going to repeat it, because we're just going to become part of the noise. And again, not a criticism, just I think what makes our organization different is, again, data. Finding the things that work and understanding the things that don't. It's like in any, I'm very entrepreneurial by nature. That's what I've been doing my entire career, through either startups or, fixing broken organizations. And one of the things that, I tell my senior team all the time, the executive team, is fail fast, right? Do not continue to do the same thing over and over again. If you fail fast and move on to the next one, because that's how you're going to make incremental progress. And so that also helped the organization greatly in the beginning, is that we did have a mindset of fail fast. Because if you get swept up in the noise, if you look and quack like a duck, people are going to call you a duck. We don't want to be a duck. We want to be something else. And so that was extremely important to making the organization successful.
Mm-hmm.
To pay tribute both to Lin-Manuel Miranda and Evelyn's favorite musical, and to tie it into kind of nonprofit and mission-oriented strategy. If we are all meant to sit under our own fig tree, that's one thing. Where that branch kind of leads and the shadow it casts has a real impact on where on that tree you might orient yourself. Maybe you're in the 3 o'clock position or the 6 o'clock position.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm looking at a person under a fig tree in Texas or in Florida, they may be sitting at the 11 o'clock and the 3 o'clock position. But in my front yard, the snow always melts faster than my neighbors because we're at a slightly different orientation. I'm going to approach my fig tree a little bit different in order to get the same outcome of sitting under the shade.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're able to think about similar mission, similar approach, the circumstances of our circumstances change our strategy, they influence our tactics, then we're going to get to an outcome. We can be influenced and informed by those organizations without having to rip off the carbon paper and copy exactly what they're doing.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
One of the most unique aspects of Safer Tennessee is its truly bipartisan coalition. It doesn't happen often in a lot of work. And I'm curious to know how you built something that includes Republicans, Democrats, and independents on an issue that is highly charged in a hyper-polarized climate.
I think it goes back to the conversation we had earlier about the tent, right? If you truly believe that securing firearms, storing them and securing them will make the community safer, if you truly believe that anybody that has access to a firearm or purchases a firearm, whether in a store or through a private sale, should get a background check, and if you truly believe that those struggling immensely with mental health challenges need to take a break from their firearms so they can get the help that they need and then get them back if they are deemed well. If you believe those three things, we didn't really care what your political ideology was, right? Because there's room in the tent for everybody. Now, I could say that, both parties have gone a little extreme. And so I find our tent full of a lot of independents that may not have been independents 5 years ago. But I also find it full of tried and true Republicans and tried and true Democrats who all believe those three things. And if you can do that, and you can check the rest of your baggage outside of the four walls of the tent, then the tent is big enough for everybody. And that's how it built. I mean, we went to Chattanooga and we raised $200,000 in a room full of Republicans. That says something, right? We also raise a lot of money in your typical Democrat neighborhoods here in Nashville, right? And everywhere in between across the state as the coalition has grown. And I think, people speak in the declarative all the time. But sometimes they also understand that there's an opportunity to nuance your declarative statement and be like, I'm for this, but that's actually a good idea too. So let's go over there with those guys on that particular issue, but I'm for these 9 other things. And that's fine. And that's the way it should be, right? It's like, Adam, you're very political in nature. I liken it to ticket splitting, right? You don't have to vote straight down the column of R's or straight down the column of D's or straight down the column of third-party candidates. You can vote for the best person to do the job. And when it comes to our issues, I think what we have found is irrespective on how you go down the ticket, people are splitting that ticket when it comes to these 3 issues, and they are saying, hey, we're going in this column for this.
I also think every successful insurgent campaign I've ever led or been a part of, the through line of success there is when you can draw a direct link to what causes the status quo issue or candidate to be out of alignment with, or kind of incongruent with the majority of the people or things that are involved. And I'm thinking about one in particular that I'll spare the listeners all of the detail around. But when you are able to show that the majority of folks are out of alignment with an issue or the thing that is representing a barrier to progress is out of alignment with the majority of folks, those incongruencies are power to the insurgency that you are trying to drive, and should be seen as strategic and tactical value adds that I think allow folks, particularly on issue-based campaigns, to think more broadly and ecumenical about who are the people that make up the work that we're doing that can power that insurgency. And when you're advocating for policy and issue change, that when you can answer that question, in my mind, I think you're getting really close to solving the path forward.
I couldn't agree more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's exactly right. And, I'm sure we'll talk about this later on this morning, but as we travel around the state, I mean, I've done, 12, 18 Rotaries, Kiwanis, civic clubs, whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter what people's political views are in that room. They all are nodding their heads saying, yeah, we should do something about this because this is bad. And I think getting back to your original question, how you got everybody to the table is we started shining a light on the data. We started showing the facts. And there's not a single person, I don't care what political party you're with, that doesn't want their community to be safer, period. Mm-hmm. They just don't want another covenant to happen. They don't want what's going on in downtown Memphis to happen in Columbia or Manchester. They just don't. And I think that this whole notion, which I think Nashville suffered from before covenant happened, that it'll never happen in my backyard, got ripped away pretty quick.
Thinking about establishing successful organizations and organizations that last, whether intentional or unintentional, there are some rules of the road that get scribbled down in the way that we approach the organization and the way that we approach our work. What were those kind of quote unquote rules of the road that you all established for yourselves and for the organization? And then I'll add in kind of a follow-up question here on the listening piece, because I think that from my view, it's one of the things that sets this organization apart, in that you have a clear objective around three issues that you're advocating for, three policy changes that you're advocating for. But in that advocacy, what I see from a lot of your advocates is not a lot of bullhorn advocacy, but a lot of listening advocacy. And I'm curious, this is a choose your own adventure answer. What were the rules of the road that you established for yourselves? And how has listening and intentional restraint played a critical role in the success and the tone of the organization?
So I'll kind of say my personal and then segue into more of an organizational approach. But something that is just huge to me is the face-to-face discussion. Again, with our phones, with technology, we don't do that. And it's not encouraged. In fact, the opposite's encouraged. It's like, what can we do as quickly as possible without actually talking to the person, And that is just in the bigger picture of so many things. And something that has been so eye-opening to me and hopeful, again, listen to me use this word with this discussion, is these face-to-face conversations and getting out into communities outside of Davidson County. Exactly what Todd said. It is amazing how, it doesn't matter what political belief you may feel. When we start talking about where we're at and they hear the statistics that they weren't aware of, it also just truly becomes, it's a health crisis. And that's something that makes it just easier is a big word, or not quite correct, but just it does seem to
Tangible.
help me exactly go in the approach that I want to with that, without stepping into the different parties in that discussion, because you really and truly won't hear that from me. And that's not what I'm doing this for, because it is way beyond that now. And precious lives are getting lost. And somewhere in this long process, we have taken away some of the basic requirements and needs that are needed for firearm safety. It's just like we've just kind of gradually removed some things. And, it's just kind of like even bringing that back. And so many people agree with that, even in rural communities. And I always like to let people know I am from a very small town in southern Missouri.
Houston, Missouri.
Texas County. Going to give it a shout out because nice work, Todd.
Thank you. I've heard that. I love it. I say it all the time.
And listen, oh my goodness, like I'm so thankful for the town I grew up in. And, so it's like I have that passion too for the small rural communities because, again, it can be a beautiful thing. But also I think I'm learning more. Instead of just even party divide, there's often a urban rural divide that a lot of people feel. And it's trying to spread this message that, you may hear about more of the stuff happening in the bigger cities, but it is also happening in the rural communities, very much so. And especially when we start talking about suicide rates. Yep. East Tennessee
twice
as high of a suicide rate
as West Tennessee, right?
Yeah,
and that's small town USA, and it is important.
So just understanding this level of truly health crisis need, rather than where we stand as a party here or there.
That's right.
That's my focus.
So rules of the road, though. So you used a great term that I haven't thought about in a while, and that's bullhorn advocacy. That was one of our rules. We are not going to be bullhorn advocates. We believe that, and I think Katie just articulated it very well, face-to-face conversations are important. Respecting that certain people aren't going to be in your tent. You're going to have to meet people where they are. So when we started laying out rules of engagement and rules of the road for the organization, it's like we will not be yelling at lawmakers. We will not be staging die-ins on the Capitol floor. We will schedule appointment. We will sit behind closed doors. We will have a respectful conversation. We will understand that maybe they aren't where we want them to be, but to her point, can we find the 1% that we do agree on? And same thing in rural communities. Now, again, I talked about all the civic organizations. I'd say out of the, let's call it 18 that I've been to, 75% of the people are those that I talked about earlier that are nodding their head. There's going to be the 25% that aren't. And you know what? That's okay. And I think that's one of the things that we started early and often with is that's okay. The other thing that's important to us from Rules of the Road, and then I know we'll take a break because, again, I really need one, is this has to be a Tennessee solution. It has to be solved by Tennesseans. It's not going to be solved by somebody from California, Florida, New York, Connecticut, D.C., Indiana. You name the state that's tried to tackle these issues. It has to come from us, which means we have to get out and talk to people from Memphis to Mountain City, as is so often said.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, Todd, thank you for your time this morning. We will pause here and pick back up in part 2 next week, where we'll talk more about strategy, policy, and navigating disagreement, and most importantly, what comes next for Voices for a Safer Tennessee. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a review and share it with someone you think would find it valuable. And if you're curious to learn more about Voices for a Safer Tennessee and the ways they're advocating for responsible gun safety policies, please visit their website at safertn.org. Part 2 of this episode will be released next week, and I know you don't want to miss it, so be sure to subscribe to Catalysts for Change wherever you get your podcasts, or visit us at catalystsforchangepod.com. Thanks again for listening to Catalysts for Change, brought to you in part by the Southern Research Collaborative. Until next time, I'm Adam Lister, and I'll see you soon.